Welcome to episode 22 of Unloose the Goose. I am CJ Kilmer, and I am joined. The gaggle this evening is composed of Nicole Sauce, Jack Spirko, Xavier Hawk, and Sal Mayweather. Great to talk with all of you this evening.
You too, CJ. Thanks.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I've been out a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
so
to have you back
tonight.
Been off piking, man.
What's that?
I was asking if you had something fun to drink tonight because you're off school.
No, I'm actually taking the night off from boozing. I hit the sauce pretty good yesterday evening, because yesterday is when I finally slew the dragon of the semester from hell. I posted Gandalf-related GIFs on social media about this. So yes,
I learned yesterday what a nerd you were by seeing all of those GIFs.
Yes. I'm
As
very
if we
much
didn't know.
Yeah. So last night was I hit the sauce a bit too much, honestly. So taking the night off, just having some nice filtered water. That's it for me. Plus, I got to get up a little bit early tomorrow anyway. So anyway, our topic for this evening is one that everybody struggles with pretty much all the time, if we're being honest. But often people don't want to talk about it. But for a lot of people, it's been really bad this year. And of course, the topic is mental health, which I think I posted a tweet that went big some months back where I said the mental health of the average American was basically shit to begin with before all this stuff started. And then you throw in the pandemic, and more importantly, all the responses to it, the lockdowns, the economic destruction, the various, riots and protests and looting and all blah, 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 blah. And, everybody's mental health has been taking a hit over the past 9 months, pretty hard, mine included. So I guess start off, just go around with some basic thoughts in terms of, you can either talk about the big picture, like what you see looking around our society as a whole, and or your own small world, however much you're willing to share as far as, the challenges that you have faced this year, successes and failures, right? Things that maybe you could have done better or want to do better going forward. Any hacks, whatever like that. We'll work our way through all that. So just sort of opening thoughts, either big picture, little picture, or a little bit of both. I'll just go around clockwise on the screen. So Xavier, what are your thoughts? Mental health 2020.
I'm fine. Everything's cool. I'm great. Hey, it's awesome.
Good. You've got to share all your hacks with us then.
So I had a bit of a unique experience because when I was a young person, like 8 years old, I had a vision essentially of the future, and it included a strange and dangerous virus from China, literally. And so that defined my life from like early teenage years into my adolescence and into my adulthood. And that vision is what prompted me to learn survival, learn wilderness tracking, wilderness skills, homesteading, buying a farm. Like it literally set me off on my course in life, preparing for what I feared in the future. And then when it arrived in November and I saw it on the, on media and what was happening in Wuhan, I was like, oh, this is fucking it. This is the thing, right? And I put out a blast to some of my friends down in South Florida. And I said, you are welcome to our farm, but you need this list of things. You need to be prepared for this. And you need to be mentally prepared for these things. And they all laughed. Like they literally were like, are you crazy? Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you'll see, just have those things. If you don't, I would feel bad if I didn't tell you this. But if you don't prepare, I won't feel bad if you show up and I say no. So I really made that clear up front. Like, I'm going to share with you what you need to do. If you think I'm crazy, at least I've shared with you, and I can sleep well at night because I'm going to say fuck off if you show up without any preparedness. Then when it was happening and we were like locked up in the mountains, and we were like, there wasn't a case up until August. And we were literally in our cabin and our surrounding woods. We went hiking. We never wore a mask. Nobody like it's as if we just took a sabbatical in the woods, right? An extended summer vacation for the kids. And we all did really well. They did. My family did. Me, I was watching the news every day and like seeing everything just quickly slide down into like this hellacious landscape of absurdity.
Yeah, you were watching the news. That's your problem there.
Oh, not only that, I was watching people beating each other up and burning things down and doing all kinds of ridiculous shit that, you know, nobody has any good business of doing. And so I was like, oh my God, this is really going bad. And so that there was a period of a couple weeks there where I was not pleasant to be around, you know, and even though I would be like walking in the woods and like literally digging gardens and doing all the shit you're supposed to do for good mental health, you know. But yeah, I was looking at social media, as you pointed out, and that was not good. And then at some point I turned around and I said, I don't accept this. Like, I don't care if I fail. I don't care if I die, go out fighting, whatever. Like, I am going to stand for the future that I believe in. And I'm going to do so provocatively and exuberantly and you know, go pedal to the metal, full bore steam ahead, desiring, building and envisioning and getting other people to help build the future that I want to see happen. So that's really what shifted me. It was the saying, I really don't care what's going on around. I don't care what anybody's going to enforce, you know, like if they impinge upon my civil liberties or as my soul liberties, then, you know, I'll go out as a warrior, I suppose. And so once I made that decision, I said, well, I'm going to go about this in an intelligent way. What's the world I want to build and how can I do that? So I really just kicked off and started doing baseline and doing all of these things to counteract the insanity, you know?
I think baseline is probably one of the best things you've done for your mental health this year, because
it is.
If you start mocking things, you cope with them better.
Right?
Yeah. I think it's been good for other people's mental health because I sure laughed my ass off. By the way, why the hell did you stop putting it on Odyssey?
I haven't. It should be up there.
You haven't had one up in 3 or 4 days, man.
So does it not just automatically upload from YouTube?
Oh, it's there,
it's
Jack.
supposed to. It is?
I get notices.
I don't know why I'm not seeing it. Damn it.
Does it have thumbnail images?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, anyway, so that's what I
I reshared it. That's all.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, I just turned around and faced it and said, but I had done a whole lot of like inner demon work before this. And like, you know, there's a certain point where you can only be afraid for so long. And then it's like, okay, am I a coward? Or, you know, I'm willing to put my life on the line. I'm willing to put my life essentially on the line and say, I'm an eternal soul and I will stand for dignity, truth, honor, justice, and all of the wonderful traits of humanity come hell or high water. And once I did that.
Plus you got COVID.
Yeah.
And once you got COVID, you're like, it's not a big fucking deal. I mean, like, and I don't mean to put down anybody who had somebody that had a real hard time with it or lost somebody, but for most people, it just ain't that big. My son and my daughter-in-law have it right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, tested, confirmed, because she works in the medical profession. My grandkids have they probably have it. They have no response to it at all. They have no symptoms. And they've been back and forth while they were infected before we knew. We don't have it. I think that's a lot to do with our supplements, but
I think the hard hit to mental health is the overwhelming like completeness of it all. Like it's such a big fucking problem. And like, how do we address it? And when people don't know how to do that, they try to avoid it. So I'm like, well, I'll address it. Let's go. So that's how I dealt with it, CJ.
All right, cool. Sal, I'm assuming when you left, you were actually in New York, right? And now you're a Florida man. I'm assuming that probably helped a bit.
Well, yeah, I was in Jersey, but yeah, no,
Oh,
it
okay.
was great. And you know, escape from the Northeast, it helps a lot. But I think that there is a tremendous public health crisis right now in terms of mental health, and it's called Stockholm syndrome, right? That's the true mental health problem that we have in this country, because we're running around with a bunch of Stockholm Cindy's, and they're the ones who have forced all of this COVID muzzle-wearing, business shutting down nonsense and enabling these parasites to ruin our lives, right? It's just a matter of Stockholm syndrome. So to me, that's really the only mental health problem that I see in this country. It's sort of the root of all evil.
Yeah, and it definitely then kind of spreads through the herd and leads to various other various other forms of insanity and whatnot. Jack, any thoughts on either the big picture, the small picture, or both?
I mean, I think for me, the most stressful part of this year personally, um, and I think it's more there. I'm not talking about like the empathy thing. I have a lot of empathy for others, so it's stressful for me to see people suffering. But for me personally, was when this all first started, and I'm like, this isn't new. These types of viruses are not a new thing. It might be a new strain, but this isn't new. We know what to do with this. There's ways to treat this. And I actually was on the air talking about hydroxychloroquine before Trump made the mistake of backing it, and that had to mean that it was awful. And I was telling people about it 2 or 3 days before anybody was talking about it. I had a contact with one of the largest drug manufacturers in the country saying, hey, we're making 30 million doses of this in the next 30 days. I'm like, great, this will be great, you know? And then all of a sudden, this war on a medication that we've had for 70 years started. And they started saying that it was dangerous. And I'm like, wait, I took this for 6 months in Honduras for malaria prevention. And here's the science. And I kept making this case like, look, here's the like, because it's science, right? And it's like, here's the science. And it was the most stressful part of the year for me, trying to convince people.
I remember that.
That, hey, this works. And by the way, since they won't let you do this now, here's an alternative that will also work, that also takes zinc and puts it in the cells. And the absolute visceral hatred I got from people that I was legitimately trying to help was unbelievable to me at first. And so Xavier said, like, his seminal moment was getting to the point where he's like, I don't accept this. Well, he was talking about the virus being a threat to him, right? Like, so that's a different angle. My seminal moment was when I'm like, I totally accept this. I totally accept that these people are going to behave this way. I totally accept it. I cannot help anybody who doesn't want to be helped. I totally accept that they're going to wear masks. I totally accept that I cannot fix anything for anyone. All I can do is say, here are things. And when I let go of trying to help those who wish to not be helped, that made my mental health this year so much better. Right now, the only mental health issue personally that I feel I have is I've kind of cranked up the juice with my workload going into the end of the year, where I usually kind of right after my workshop and Thanksgiving, I kind of throw the car in neutral, push the clutch in and let it coast down, and kind of like take the easy ride out to the end of the year. Because Nicole and I share a common plan, and that is next week, goodbye, and we're gone, and we don't come back until after the new year. And I think that's very good for your mental health as well. But for me, that's what it was trying to help people and trying to convince people that, like, no, this medication that we've been taking for 70 years, it won't kill you. This medication that Veterans Affairs hands out 60,000 doses of a day won't kill you. Like, this is not dangerous. This is like one of the least side effect causing medication on the planet. And being told for that stance that I was anti-science, I still had this vestigial hope for humanity. And I just did a show this week that was like pure fire, where I was like 10 things that COVID confirmed for me and taught me. And one was the majority of people are willfully ignorant slaves to the state, and they like it that way. And it was accepting that and going, okay, so who's still here? I'm going to work with these people. That's what fixed my brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way I sometimes think about it, some of you may have read the famous essay. I think it's Albert J. Nock, Isaiah's Job, right, where he talks about the remnant, and he talks about how, if you're really speaking the truth, only a tiny percentage of people are even going to be at all receptive to what you're saying. And sometimes I even think of myself as almost being a secular Calvinist, because, I don't believe in Calvinist theology, but I do believe in the basic idea that, like, there's the elect, and no matter what you do, that's only going to ever be a tiny percentage of people. And then there's the damned, and I don't mean it in a theological sense here. I mean it in the sense of there's only a tiny percentage of people who have the combination of the hardware, the software, and the attitude to actually think. Really think about things and really try and learn things for themselves and understand things for themselves and be open-minded and all that sort of stuff. Only a tiny percentage, because we are not wired up that way by our evolution. It's the freaks, basically. It's the people that don't have the wires wired up right because we're tribal primates. And so our default setting is not rationality. So yeah, I had a similar sort of thing really a long time ago as someone who teaches college, just coming to grips with this, that like there's 10, maybe in a really good class, 20% of the students in my classes that are like really switched on and there, you know.
So are we the damned? Is that what I'm understanding
No,
correctly?
we're the
Something
anti
like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Totally.
Depends
Those are
on
the public school
whose
victims.
perspective you're looking at it from, right? We
Right.
could be the guy in I Am Legend, and from the perspective of the vampires, we're the bad guy.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So
We're also
Um,
the damned because we're surrounded by vampires. But I think what he's saying, X, it makes me think of a closing to a recent episode of Baseline, right? Right. The thing about smart motherfuckers. What did you
Yeah.
say?
Right. Oh yeah, the thing about smart motherfuckers is that we seem crazy to dumb motherfuckers.
That was
yes,
the highlight of my freaking week, man.
yeah. I mean, if you were wrongfully put in a mental asylum and you truly were not insane, I mean, everybody else, all the other inmates would think you were insane, right? Because you're the only one not going along with all their bullshit. So, Nicole, any openers, big picture, small picture on the mental health question?
I think I have a balance of both personal and big picture. This year, I was struck by something I've known for a long time, but I didn't want to believe it. And that is that most people do not want to be free. Freedom is their right, but you are not, like, unless you take that right, you are not free. Freedom is a choice, and it's how you live your life. And in order to be in a place where you can make the choice to be free, you have to have the mental capacity to do it, the mental health to do it. You have to have a certain amount of confidence to just say, fuck you. I'm going to go do what I need to do to live the life I want to live. I don't care what you think about it. If you try to get in my way, I'm just going to walk around you as best I can. And if I can't walk around you, I'll figure something else out. That's how freedom works. Right, Jack.
I can't walk around you.
And I came into this year personally at one of the lowest mental health places I've been, having had a 14-year relationship end shortly before the year started, and realizing that in order to have space for somebody in my life ever again in the future, I had to fix me first. Because to have that particular relationship end the way it did and have it go on as long as it did in an unhealthy manner, it was my fault, not his fault. And so I started seeing a psychologist, and she's just been unlocking all sorts of stuff for me. So like, as this year has ramped up and we've gone through all this craziness, which is hard because it's hard to be separated from your loved ones. My choir has not, like my choir, my creative outlet of singing with people did not meet this year. We've done some digital stuff, but it's not the same.
No.
Like between 73 and 90% of our communication is nonverbal, it's not our words, it's something else. And so if you're not in person with somebody, it's not the same. Like even just being here digitally with y'all, I get visual cues, I hear your tone of voice. But if we were in the same room, this would be a totally different podcast, right? From a communication standpoint. And people really underestimate that. But I think that something we don't talk about in the freedom world much, because the idea is like you just have to choose to be mentally healthy. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes you need a coach, sometimes you need help, sometimes some people need medication, and that's all good. But if we make it so that it's not comfortable to talk about mental health issues openly, and that we have to hide them under the rug, or addiction issues or struggles that we're having, it sets up a situation where we hide it under the rug, then we don't deal with it, and we can't truly be free. So I'm all about like, let's talk about it, not in a way that brings everybody down or is just venting with no resolution, but let's not hide. You know, so I said on my podcast that I see a psychologist and somebody's like, wow, that was brave, Nicole. I'm like, no, it wasn't. That's normal. That's what, when I need antibiotics, I'm going to go to the doctor, right?
Yeah. I was gonna say, you wouldn't say somebody's brave. They're like, I have psoriasis, so I went to see a dermatologist.
Yeah, I got exactly. So it's something, and I can't tell you, like I had seen some psychologists as a teenager years ago. This particular one I found has been just instrumental in changing a lot of what I'm doing. And then therefore my business is more successful. My podcast is more successful. Like all of it's coming together. And the big thing is learning to make space for me. and not just all other people, right? Make space for me. And that's why starting on Friday, it's FU. No, Nicole is closed for 2 weeks.
Mhm.
I will do things if I want to, period, end of story.
I think that me time's really important. I think that one of the things you have going for you, and I do, and I think everybody else here does, is that one way or another in your life, you still have human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And the people I feel really, really deeply for are the people that, because they're afraid or because they just don't have anybody around them that they can be allowed to be around, and because they live in freaking something that makes Nazi Germany look free. Some of our parts of our country are like that right now. They literally can't be with anybody. And when you talk about human interaction being nonverbal, like, you don't have to believe in any kind of spirituality or anything like that to understand that human beings have energy fields and that we can sense each other's energy, because everybody's had a point where you're in a room and it's totally quiet and somebody walks in that room and you know they're there. How if you didn't hear them, they didn't make any sound, how do you know they're there if there's not some sort of energy interaction? I remember one time I was closing on a house, so I was in a good mood. I'm buying a house, right? And I walked into the room to close, and I literally felt like bad everything, like my stomach, like when you're in like a bad place. And it turned out the people we were buying the house from, and I didn't know this at the time, were in the middle of a divorce, and they were both there because they didn't either one trust the other one about the closing. And like, it was like walking into like a horror movie. And I was, you walk in, you're like, oh, what's wrong? And so, like, if you can feel that, then you can feel other human interactions beyond like physical touch, even, like, because I think that's important too. But like, to not be able to assemble and be with people. And Nicole was saying before we got on, and I've noticed the same thing with my workshop, and I know other people have as well. Like, you run an event this year where people can come commune and be together. It's insane. Like, you sell out. Like, I mean, even if you normally sell out, you sell out in a day, you sell out in 5 minutes because people just want to go do something and they want to be with people. And you can't possibly tell me that it doesn't have a negative effect on somebody's mental health when there's something they want to do, that they know they should be able to do, that they normally would be able to do, and now they can't do it. And not, 14 days to flatten the curve. How the hell did that work out for us, right? Like, you're going on a year now. And I think, like, my other thing that I'm really worried about, suicide level going up, is I think we're about to see a wave of evictions.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about kicking somebody when they're down, you lose your, like, at least you have your home. Like, that's something I'm really scared for people about.
Yeah. Yeah. My experience of this whole thing, basically, I've had times when I was getting stressed out by sort of the big picture of everything, and I would just, cut way back on my news consumption and that sort of thing. But what really started to get me, especially over the past few months, that we've already sort of alluded to before, is what happened with my day job. Now, on the one hand, I'm grateful that my day job did not disappear because of the lockdowns, like so many people's jobs did, right? And then, of course, I've got my podcast as a side hustle, but that, can't pay all my bills yet. But, okay, my paychecks didn't stop coming from work. That's great. I'm not in danger of being evicted. That's wonderful, right? My wife's job, same thing. Both still have our jobs. But what happened to my job was they made all classes online for this semester that just ended. And most of the classes that I was teaching were classes I had never taught online before. And so I was starting from like blank slate. Literally, I'm building a bridge across a river with the people crossing the river breathing down my neck the whole time, right? And so my paychecks kept coming in from the college like normal with the same amount of dollars, but I was probably working twice as many hours as I normally would. And it's one of those things where sometimes the things that damage your mental health are like the big dramatic things, like a close loved one dies or something traumatic happens. And sometimes the things that harm your mental health are the little drip of water on the rock, right? And that's what really got me over the past, 3-4 months, was just, I was just at my wit's end a lot of the time trying to handle, and on paper you'd be like, oh, look, you get to work from home now. You're going to have all this, freedom. Like, no way. I was working way more hours than I did when I have to commute into work and teach in person. And I hate teaching online anyway. I just despise it for a bunch of reasons. And so basically for me, great that I still had my job, but the job turned into extremely stressful and unpleasant experience in a way that it normally is not. And so that's what I've been struggling with in the little world, right? In the little world. Starting off, I probably did better than most people in the early phases of this because I am a bit of a prepper, so I wasn't completely unprepared for getting through those early months when everything was weird. But it's been this semester at work, and then it does things like it eats into time I would normally put into my podcast, and so I haven't been able to podcast as often as I normally would, and that pisses me off because I like doing that, and so that's kind of what I've been dealing with, is like how to try and keep my sanity in the face of that, like little daily stresses, and I already have, I think, genetic tendencies towards depression. It runs in my family. And so when I start to get stressed, I start to get depressed. And so that's how all this crap has been, touching me directly. And it's one of those things where you always feel kind of dumb when you're talking about the stuff that's like really getting you down, because no matter how bad it is, there's always a zillion people that have it worse. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But again, the whole idea that like we need to not turn things into like a victimhood Olympics, almost in the same way as like the woke crowd does, where it's like, well, you're not quite as oppressed as this guy, so you've got nothing to complain about. It's like, no, everybody's got shit, everybody's got things,
and they need toilet
them.
paper.
Yeah,
exactly.
Talk about being depressed.
And at least we can find it now, right?
Yeah.
If you're on the plot looking at an empty roll, you're depressed, right?
Sorry.
I think it's only going to get worse too, because as the whole COVID crisis and the economy, everybody starts to inflate the money. It's going to get worse and worse. There's going to be more people without jobs, and there's going to be more people who are depressed and having negative thoughts and stuff like that. I think a lot of people out there are probably watching, thinking like, well, what's the Agora solution for mental health, right? And I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist, but I can tell you the one thing that you shouldn't do is to call the government police on somebody who's a suicidal person, because that never works out well. And that's a great way to get friends and family hurt. So like I said, I don't know what the solution is, but don't call the police on a suicidal person. So that's one Agorist approach to mental health.
It's a good one. Friendly PSA. Don't fucking call the police.
Don't point a cop at somebody that you wouldn't point a gun at, because when you point a cop at somebody, you're pointing a gun at them. And I don't say that. I'm not as hard on police as some people in our circle are, but when you're back to you're asking somebody with a hammer to take care of something that needs a scalpel, like you really, and I mean, to be fair to cops, which I try not to do too often, they're not social workers. That's not their job. They're not there to be a social. They're not damn sure not psychologists. And there are some law enforcement officers that I think maybe would be right for that. But you're spinning a wheel, and it's a really big wheel, and there's only a couple on it that are going to be winners, and you're probably not going to get one of those. I imagine somebody that was highly trained in hostage negotiation tactics would probably be a good person to be dealing with a suicidal person. But Bill that just got back from the sand 2 years ago and got a job as a cop because that's where he could find, and he's still, pumping roids at the gym that he can go to that you can't. That's probably not the guy to call on a dude that has a gun, right? That's threatening to hurt himself, right? I mean, that's probably not a good idea. And you don't know who you're going to get. It's that big wheel, and 9 out of 10 of those places that wheel can land is the wrong guy. And I wouldn't do it.
There's some real horror stories out there.
Getting help, but not through a cop. What's a cop going to do? Take you to jail? That helps suicidal people.
They may take you to be committed.
Yeah,
right.
At best.
Or they might take you to jail. And you know what they do when they take you to jail?
Mm.
The first thing they do, like because I went to airport jail. We won't get into that story tonight, but I went to airport jail once, and they took my belt away. Right? They took away everything I could use to harm myself, because they know that you become a suicide risk when they lock you in a cage. So probably locking people that have mental health problems in a cage is probably in most instances not the right idea.
Funny how they didn't take the belt from Jeffrey Epstein, though, right?
But I gave him sheets, man. He had
Yeah,
I got
right,
sheets.
right.
What the hell? He got
Right,
sheets.
right.
I
Their
have a
mental health doesn't
old-ass
count.
metal
If
bed.
you're a Democratic operative, your mental health isn't important. But that's another story for another podcast, I suppose.
Yeah,
So here's something I have a question about. I was a little shocked to learn this year that most parents, it appears, don't actually like spending time with their children or don't know how to spend time with their children. How long has that been the case? Has it been 100 years, 50 years, 20 years? Like, people are in agony over spending time with their children because their children are home and they're home. And while I understand,
Crazy.
like, everybody needs space from each other in a family, like, zero coping skills from the children or the parents.
Well,
Like, they just, like, all of a sudden they're together. They're like, oh my God, we've never been around together each other before. Now what do we do?
Oh my God, the state! I can't sub out the parenting of my children to the state. What
I don't
now?
know. It's that, but it's just like, wow.
Well,
It
I
is.
don't know about y'all, but like any chance I get to play Legos, I'm gonna take.
You
Right,
see,
yeah.
that's-
And like we were doing Hot Wheels and like building little ramps for them and stuff. And like that's the shit I live for. Like the kids don't care what the hell's going on around them, thankfully, because they don't know. And that's what makes them happy, and that's what makes them carefree, still carrying the spirit of life and joy. Like there's a quote that a friend of mine told me the other day, and it was that you are granted a cup of joy each day. You are guaranteed a cup of joy each day from the creator, whoever that might be to you. And it's your job to sip from it and to protect it and make sure nobody can take from your cup. And if you give them permission to take from your cup, then that's on you. So if you're losing your joy, it's because you're letting the things around you overwhelm you and say that they have control over you. It's essentially victimhood, right? But when you are an essential being that you identify as something that lives forever and cannot be harmed, you are the divine soul, whatever you want to call it, child of God, then like all of these worldly things don't matter. It's who you are, essentially, like that child nature that will play and in the face of all of these things, and so I think it's important to play with your kids, or to have that innocent playful time away from all of this nonsense.
Yeah,
and
that's been
and that was badass, by the way. That was pretty freaking hardcore badass.
What, the Legos or the
No,
Playmobil?
the whole thing with the cup of joy. That was
Cup of joy. That's a big shout out to my friend Ben.
Yeah, that's pretty badass. But like the other side of that is like, so like a person like CJ. I don't think you have kids, do you, CJ? But
no, I have two.
You have two?
Yeah.
11 and 15. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, like you're a perfect example. I'm sure you don't like not want to spend time with your kids, but if you got a guy like CJ who's used to, I'm going to go do my thing all day long, my kids go do their thing, then we come home, we spend time together, and now they're together, but he's working more, not less, and has to like handhold like 50 millennials through understanding the Middle Ages or whatever he's teaching that day. And his kids are going berserk in the house because they can't go outside.
Right.
Where he lives, it's not as bad. But imagine being the person that lives in a small apartment in New York with two kids where they literally cannot go outside. And you can see where, like, even if that person was really overjoyed about being with their children, it would become stressful because their life was not built around the idea that they would be together 24 hours a day. They didn't build their life that way. And I'm talking about like the housing situation as a whole. Like, with a house the size that I have, if we were still young enough to have, children living at home instead of grandkids that come and leave, which makes it easier, there's still enough room for everybody to go do their thing. And then there's big backyard and all. The people that are put in those little spaces, I don't think it's that they don't really want to be around their kids. I think it's that it's not logistically easy, especially when you go from, because it didn't go like this. It didn't go like, now you're with your kids like a plane landing. It was like, yep, boom, there it is. Now here's your new life. And then it was also, well, it's going to be 15 days. Okay. Now, 9 months later. I mean, because
That's the fault.
I love
CJ,
my
what's your-
grandkids, man.
CJ,
But there's
what's your
days where I'm
perspective
like,
on this one? Because
I love my grandkids, but there's days like when we have them here and we homeschool now here and all, and like, well, they're out working, and I'm like, where is your mother?
Right.
But
You're going
my
home.
my favorite part of the lockdown, and it really wasn't fully locked down in Florida by that point, but my favorite part was the summer. And it's partly because I wasn't working.
Right.
But it's also, what did I do? A whole bunch of days a week, basically summer camp with my kids.
Right.
Right. We're boogie boarding, at least once a week. We're going on hikes. We're going on bike rides. I'm getting them outside. We're doing stuff. It's hotter than hell here, which always I get seasonal affective disorder in Florida in the summer just because it's so damn miserable. But even so, I'm having fun with them because it's ridiculously hot and humid. But if you're in the ocean, it's not so bad. So yeah, my experience is the opposite of a lot of these people. That was actually yet another thing that annoyed me about how ridiculous my workload was this semester was, not as much time, with my kids. I can't remember the last time we went and did like a day hike or
Yeah.
that
You
sort
had
of
a
thing.
different thing, right? Because like you hit the lockdown and you were already like 3 weeks from the end of the school year, so you didn't have to deal with it that much in that initial thing, which I think is what a lot of
Yeah.
parents just all of a sudden they had their kids doing. They called it homeschool. It was basically state school at home, like, and they're trying. And like my grandson was a pain in the ass when he didn't want to do his shit. He didn't want to do his work. He would drag ass doing it all day. And people think I'm like harsh, and I guess I am even with a 10-year-old, but I sat him down. I'm like, dude, I looked at your work. You could do that in 2 hours a day and you could be done. You could have freedom. You could do whatever you want for the rest of the day, but I guess you don't want to be free. And I walked away. 10-year-old, like, I guess you don't want to be free, and just left him there with that. And like a day later, he's in the garage with my wife and he goes, Grandma, I just want to be free. And then like once he made that switch though, like he tore ass into it. And now like we went ahead and said, like, if he's going to be home anyway, we might as well do real homeschool and all. He gets his work done. He does whatever he wants. He walks in the door and he starts doing his work. We don't even have to say anything. And I think like, if you can get kids into that rhythm, but I think parents, I mean, I know I did. My wife was in tears the first week. She's like, I don't know how we're going to be able to do this.
Mhm.
And we also knew we had to. And I think that was the other thing. Like, it wasn't a choice. And I think it's going to always be hard for people, even people that are well-adjusted people. Like when you're forced into a situation you don't want, that's the very definition of stress, right?
Yes, that's how I felt about having to teach all online when I hate teaching online. Pretty much, I had no choice.
What if you treated it like a podcast?
I mean, in a way, I kind of did.
Yeah.
But the problem is just having to build everything in Canvas, which is what we use for online classes. It is so freaking tedious and just a pain. But
Plus, aren't you dealing with like the most terrified demographic that we have? Right? The young millennial, like, isn't that
true?
like they're all like the ones that think they're going to die and crap, and or they're the complete opposite. It depends, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't seem to be. From what I could tell, of course, it's class over Zoom, so who knows? But they didn't seem to be all that fearful. I don't think. I think enough of them are realizing like young people are not going to get killed by the COVID very much. But I wanted to. I got to leave before too long, but I did want to throw out before I have to bail. Solutions, hacks, kind of nuts and bolts things, things that have worked for you all, anything that has been counterproductive or anything like that. So I'll just throw out what I've learned is that I in a way I have to treat myself like a machine, and in the sense that there's these nuts and bolts things that will make me feel better, that I intellectually know will make me feel better, but that I don't want to do.
Like working
sometimes.
Yeah.
Working out is actually something I like to do.
Yeah.
I actually got really another thing that added to my problems the past few months. I got tendonitis in my right elbow and my left wrist, and it's from spending zillion hours on the computer. And like people joke about carpal tunnel and whatever, but like it's no joke.
It ain't no joke.
It's no joke, and it ruined my ability. I could still go running and stuff like that, but it ruined my ability to like lift weights and that sort of stuff, and that hurt my mental health, because that was one of the things I would do to make me feel better. But I actually like exercise and look forward to it. But it's other things that I know will make me feel better that a lot of times I will, like making sure I get good sleep, right? Um, exercise and nutrition, I'm pretty good on, ever since I lost 100 and something pounds or whatever. I've got that dialed in. But still, that's important for people who are not, disciplined on that. But just other nuts and bolts things. Make sure to do things you love. Like I've had times where, I've been a guitar player since I was 12. I've had times during all this where I don't touch my guitar for
Right.
a few weeks, and I'm like, "Whoa, what am I doing?"
Right.
And I pick it up and I feel better, like right away.
Yeah.
Things like that, and then
Okay.
also time in nature. Time in nature is important. Time with kids, especially if you actually like your kids like I do. And then let's see, did I have one more thing? Oh, meditation.
Dude, you're taking all of ours.
That's
What are we
another-
going to say now?
We're gonna say yeah, and meditation.
Ditto.
And meditation.
Well, meditation for me is one of those things where I enjoy it while I'm doing it, and I feel better after I've done it. But before I do it, it's that resistance, right? Like in that book,
Right.
The War of Art. It's the resistance where sometimes I'll make it through the whole day and go, "Oh shit, I never meditated." No wonder I feel kind of
Right.
not right in the head. But anyway, those are just some of the things that have been very helpful for me, and trying to in all of this craziness and the days blurring together, trying to resist booze every evening, right? Trying to keep it to like a couple of evenings a week, and that's it. That's that's been something I've had to every now and then be like, whoa, gotta dial it back. So and it's all of these things, you never get to the point where you go, I'm done, right? I no longer have to work on all these things.
Right.
It's always an ongoing struggle. So anyway, those are just I wanted to make sure I got all those in, because I do have to bail in like 15
Everybody
minutes.
shit. That's all right.
But yeah, well,
No, no,
anybody
it's
want
Yeah,
to
maybe
tell me I'm full of shit, these are bad things, or
No, it's great.
want to drill into some more specifics or anything I didn't mention? I'm sure there's plenty of other stuff besides just what I mentioned.
Well, I think everybody's individual answer on that for solutions is a little different. And it starts with spending time learning what you need. And Jack said this on his podcast once, that, I deserve what I want. You figure out what you want, then you tell yourself, I deserve what I want. Learning to deserve what you want is really hard for people because we're not taught that. We're taught that we shouldn't take what we want, right? And I think that mental shift is what you need to do to be able to understand, like, I'm happiest personally on an exercise world if I can swim in a pool. Do you know what COVID is not good for? Public pools.
Mhm.
Right. And I knock out meditation because all I'm thinking about is how many more lengths of the pool I'm going to swim. It's just a number in my head, and that's all I'm thinking about, and breathing, and it's rhythmic, and it's just zen for me. That for me in COVID, that's been the hardest exercise that I lost. And swimming in a lake is not the same as in a pool. I was a competitive swimmer in high school, so it's just like this thing I do where I go and I'm there, and it fixes all my problems. And so learning what you need is really important, and then figuring out how to do that when the public pools are all closed down. Like, how can I get that same element without being in a pool? Because sometimes your
What hours
reality-
did I jump over the fence with nobody seeing me?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I just started walking a lot is what I started doing, because it's at least if nobody's with me and my phone's off when I'm walking, I can start kind of doing some of those same mental things that I do in the pool. But once you know what you want and you know why, then if the metaphorical pool is not available, you can figure out, okay, what can I do next? Because it is up to you to figure out that thing, right? Or you'll end up just twisted.
Yeah, I had to put together a home gym. I was a guy who hit the gym like almost every day for a long time. And when the gyms closed for a couple months, I was totally up a creek. And one of the things that disappeared real quick when things started locking down was home gym equipment. And so it was very hard. Like if I could come across a couple of 10-pound plates, I was like, hoarding them. So it took me a couple of months to accumulate enough weights and equipment and whatever in my home that I could get a really good comprehensive strength workout. I was doing what I could, I was doing body weight exercises and things like this, but that was frustrating for me early on. So I totally get what you're saying, where it's like you have to figure out, you have to figure out how to fill in the gap.
What about you, Sal?
I got two. So number one, homeschool, right? Because going back to the initial thing, the initial problem that I saw is Stockholm syndrome. The solution is to get your kids out of the indoctrination camps. So homeschool your kids. That's number one. Like most of the problems that we've spoken about tonight are COVID related, and all of that comes from a miseducated public and ignorant public. So get your kids out of the camps. That's step one to having a mentally healthy public. The other thing is prepare, be sufficiently prepared. Listen to shows like Nicole's and Jack's, and listen to X and all the people who talk about being prepared, because that will sort of take off the anxiety. It's almost like relieving a weight off your chest when you're prepared. You don't have to worry about,
You face it.
you don't have to worry about what's going to come next. So you're not really, the only thing we fear is the unknown. So if you're sufficiently prepared for everything, then you're really not going to fear anything. So those are my two: be prepared and get your kids out of the camps.
That's a good one. Jack?
Yeah. So I completely agree with get your kids out of the schools. The changes in my grandson I have seen have been amazing. I mean, it's amazing the difference in how he conducts himself, how he behaves, how he learns, how he gets excited about things. I can't agree with that enough. I look at the public ed system as a horrible thing, and it's laying on the ground, writhing in pain. Stab it, quit trying to save it, and that will do good for your mental health. Killing evil things makes men and women feel better. So let's kill that beast. Let's get rid of it, and we don't need it in our lives anymore. That is a huge thing. And then that transcends into, you now have a sense of purpose. You're now taking on the role of doing what all parents should, educating your children. And I think one of the greatest things in the world to lift your sense of well-being is to have a sense of true purpose, to find meaning in your work.
Yeah.
And I think part of why I did so well this year was I had a purpose. Like in the middle of a pandemic, where could you have more of a purpose than running a podcast on preparedness? Like, okay, I'm born for this. I'm made for this. This is my whole life's work sitting here in front of me. But I found myself at the very beginning kind of snapping at my audience a little bit, probably more than I should have, because they were freaking out. I'm like, I've been teaching you assholes for 12 years. Like, how are you not prepared on toilet paper after 12 years? How are you panicking over wheat berries after 12 years of doing this? Not realizing, okay, well, first of all, dumbass, you have people that started listening to you 3 weeks ago. Like, let's be in touch with that, right? And then, but the other side of it was, I didn't realize I was actually having almost like, I don't know, some version of like survivor's guilt, but instead of being survivor, like being preparedness guilt. Like I was so prepared for this. Yeah. I so didn't give a shit that I actually felt bad that people that I'd been trying to help weren't, or at least felt that they weren't. Exactly. It's like, well, we might not be able to go grocery shopping for a week. I don't give a shit. We don't go grocery shopping for 3 months. Like if I didn't lose a deep freezer right before this shit started, I would have given a shit for 8 months. I mean, like literally, like this meant nothing to me from a logistical standpoint. Yeah. And then that was still stressful because now you're trying to help people that are in a panic mode. And all of a sudden I started getting all these requests for interviews. And they were from people like, we want you to come on and talk about COVID. So I'm like, I'm going to talk about this supplement protocol and what you do to protect yourself. And they're like, well, how do you get started prepping? I'm how like, well, you're totally fucked now, right? Like, like, how do I help you? And so to me, now that it is not that hard, I can't believe how quick people forget, right? Like, okay, so nobody's prepared again because
prepping is working again already.
You go to the store and freaking like Washington State, they're already like wiping shelves out. LA County's already wiping shelves out because they only let 20% of the people in the store. They stand in a giant line for hours next to each other to go into the store and not be next to each other. And you're like, how are you in this position? Like if you live in New York City, I understand you have no place to put your food. I get that. Other than that, like, how didn't you learn from this? Like, it's not been hard to prepare since like June. You could pretty much get most of what you wanted. I mean, in June, I was fishing. You guys were talking about meditation. Like for me, meditation is a fishing pole. and having that little thin line and your finger on it and being connected with that animal that you're kind of going to war one-on-one with on its own terms on the other end of it, that to me has been a big solution for me. But yeah, homeschool and be prepared. Like I totally agree with that. And find whatever your meditation is, whether it's, actually sitting in a lotus position and, visualizing the universe and being connected to it. And that was something that was a big part of my life many years ago. It's not really anymore. Now I get that same sort of sensation from fishing, being in the wilderness, working in the garden. I'm sure that since CJ plays guitar, that you get that. Working out, a lot of times you get into kind of a meditation when you're working out. I remember, like, I used to have these different, like, music lists, really pumping up music, and like you get into a workout and you're finished with your workout and you're like, whew, like, and you're still all keyed up on it and you didn't even realize you were done. You're like, okay, what am I supposed to do now? Wait, I'm done. Like that kind of getting lost in your work in a good way, whatever, and not necessarily your work like your job work, but your work, your meaningful work on yourself, your meaningful work to help others, the meaningful things in your life. And I think that's part of what's hurt people, man, because so many people, that was the church for them. Right. I'm not a religious guy, but man, I respect the person that is their thing. Like they lost that sense of purpose. I think that's one of the biggest things that's hurt people is, so you got to find something to replace that sense of purpose. And maybe defiance, and just do it anyway. That might make everybody's mental health better. If I think we could end this tomorrow if 20% of the people said, nope, I'm not doing it, but we can't even get to that. And that's frustrating for me. That hurts my mental health. Oh, last thing, my wife said, as soon as I told her we're talking about tonight, turn off the fucking television. Like that is like the number one thing you can do.
I did that in 1996. Yeah. Shit. CJ, you have something before you bounce?
Yeah. With you on the fishing too, Jack. And that's been another thing annoying me. Is I've been so busy, I haven't gone fishing in a few months, and that's also not good for my head. But on the topic of staying away from the news, I just have one more quick hack that I figured out.
Baseline
has done a lot, which is you obviously need to at least every now and then keep an eye on current events, just so like if the riots are coming down your cul-de-sac or whatever, or the redcoats are coming down your cul-de-sac, you want to know that, right? But I've just found, for me personally, I keep it very limited in time, not just in duration, but when I do it. I have found that for me, I don't consume any current events type content in the morning or at night. If I do it, it's in the middle of the day, right? Because if I start, tuning into the news or whatever in the morning, screws up my mood right from the get-go. And if I'm doing it before I go to sleep, ruins my relaxation, my sleep, everything like that. So I would urge everybody, cut back current events a lot, news consumption, keep it in the middle of the day, or at least try, and maybe it'll work for you like it has for me. It's been great talking to you all. I got to bail. I'll look forward to listening to the last half hour when the podcast drops.
Thanks, CJ.
Merry Christmas, New Year's.
Same to you all.
So, on what he was saying there, this thing here, put this, and I'm holding for the people on the podcast, hold on my cell phone, put this away when you go to bed.
Yeah.
You're sitting in bed like this, like
silence.
And if you want to read or something, then read something like fiction. Don't, even if you're big into libertarian politics or, agorist philosophy or whatever, don't go there before bed and put that in your head before you lay down to rest. Like, read about some sci-fi bullshit or something, like unplug. And I say that's the place for the real book, because if you have this, all of a sudden you're on freaking TikTok or whatever the hell kids are doing today. And, you're sucked back into that.
Yeah.
And man, I'm telling you that this device right here is the controlling device of humanity.
In so many ways. I mean,
I love social media, right? Because I'm a marketer, and that's a great way to get my message out. We did a whole show on it last week, but
here's something that's going to blow your mind. Okay, so I want to answer his question, and then I've got
a question that is important.
We have a really great question from Daniel in the chat right now. He's been very active in the Fire On Telegram, but his name's Daniel Schmidt. He works on solar power and stuff. Really great dude. So the first thing I want to answer his question was, I do all the things, right? But like, all of those things, like the meditation, the working out, I get up and I have a work that I do that's important to me. I'm working on business that's important to me that I feel is going to make the world a better place. I am actively engaged in resisting the current frequency or the current polarity of the planet, right? The fear polarity. And I'm saying, no, I'm good. If you're going to be extra fearful, I'm going to be extra fucking shiny. And, so like, but all of those things have something in common, and that is withdrawing into yourself and being with that eternal present I amness, right? Like playing guitar, you're just playing, and that's what makes life worthwhile. That's what the kids enjoy all the time, playing. So it's almost it's not an escape. It's I am joyful despite this or despite what's going on. And that is super powerful. And like preparing, being able to go off into the woods with just a knife and know that you're going to be okay. Like that has created the most kind of confidence in my life that I don't even know how I can convey how comfortable I am in the world now because of that, no matter what happens. Right. And a thinking mind. So that's just an answer to that question. I get up really early. I do the news like all the time. Like I'm constantly situational awareness, what's going on at the bigger picture. And this is the reason, because if you know how radio waves work, they send a signal and they send the data on that signal, right? Now, when a bunch of humans all react to the same news story at the same time and have the same emotional frequency, it's a literal frequency. And you can propagate information on a standing wave of people that are all afraid. So that's like, you have to have self-auditing, right? The ability to look at your own thoughts and audit what you're thinking and why, and then exert some discipline and control onto that and choose what frequency or I was taught this as a kid. It's like your brain is like a radio wave or a radio, and you can always choose what channel you're paying attention to. That's your thoughts. And when your thoughts go fearful, you're sending a chemical reaction through your body, and you experience that and you ride that. And unless you're able to control your thoughts and what you're thinking about, you can't control the chemical reaction that goes on in your body. So when you talk about fasting, when you talk about meditating, when you talk about all of these things, it all goes back, working out, playing music, it all goes down to controlling the little chemical reactor in your body that starts with your brain and your thoughts. So that's my little bit on that. And now the question, it's a really great question. So do you think mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, etc., are evolutionary responses to the demands for adaptation to what is currently an insane world? Like like, how do you interpret mental health issues as a evolutionary response to the changing world?
I think when we got out of survival mode, like just covering food every day and water, the mental issues have been there. We have an interesting way of categorizing them. It's very vast now, but if I look at old literature, the mental issues, if you read the stories, the mental issues are in those stories. That had to come from somewhere, right? Like, so I don't have CJ's historical perspective. I have more that I'm really into literature and language, and there were mental issues there. They were just not as classified as we have them now. I think our society propagates mental issues through subjugating them or making them something you should hide so we don't deal with them openly.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's an evolutionary thing. Like, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. I mean, that said, we've also been programmed to respond to things emotionally, I think, as a society in the US, at least, to where people have completely turned off their ability to think. But then again, I go back and I look at literature that's 500 years old, and that same type of reaction was happening in the literature. So I'm not sure it's new. And I am sure of one thing: we haven't figured out how to deal with it yet.
Do you think it has anything to do with sophisticated civilization? Like, there were crazy people in Rome, right? Like, but were there crazy people in the village in, Uganda or somewhere? Jack, you're nodding your head. Why don't you?
So I think that, like, you're hitting on it. Like, when Nicole was talking there about survival mode, I think the problem is that we actually think of our hunter-gatherer ancestors as always being in survival mode. And humans are incredibly adaptable creatures. And we had this vast period of, we still debate it, but it's hundreds of thousands of years at a minimum, where we were hunter-gatherer folks, and we lived in various ways. And that doesn't necessarily meant we were all nomads, right? If we moved when we needed to. So when we had, fairly sparse populations in jungles with lots of stuff, we didn't tend to go anywhere. We had little villages and stuff like that. But I don't think we had as many of the mental problems as we have, because we were living in a natural state. So I think evolution is an issue, but I don't think it's so much of an evolutionary response. It is, we didn't evolve for this. This is not the way we're supposed to live. Because think about, you use the word survival mode, Nicole, but like, so a guy that has a great job and all of a sudden loses it because COVID, he's in survival mode in his mind, because how am I going to provide myself a place to live? How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to handle this? How am I going to be a good dad? So if you find like the few remaining indigenous societies still living by their traditional ways, they don't give a shit about this at all. They don't care. Like, none of this matters to them. Like, what do you mean? How are you going to feed your kids? Like, I'm going to go over here and pull this log open and give my kids some worms. Or they're going to club this animal over the head, or I'm going to go to the river and I'm going to fish and I'm going to feed my kid piranhas or whatever. Like, I just think of like all the places in the world that I've been to, that if like I could be dropped into that place and they'd be like, that poor bastard. And I'd be like, you come back, I'm going to gain weight. I might not have all the doodads coming in from Amazon or whatever, but like my basic needs. And this planet was developed. I should say, this planet was developed when we began to develop and co-evolve with it. And so we evolved to live on what this planet provides us. And we have indigenous societies that have lived literally in the Arctic freaking circle, through the middle of the deserts, into the jungles, all over the planet. And we didn't have half this shit as a problem until we got fucking civilized. And the day that the people that were psychopaths among us figured out that, hey, we can grow grain, and we can put these motherfuckers in buildings next to this field of grain, and we can put the grain in a silo instead of letting them fucking eat it, and we can save it, and we can put down on a piece of paper that there's a certain amount of grain in the silo, and this ticket gets you so much of it, and use that as money and create banking. That's when we fucked everybody up.
Yep.
So yeah, it's evolutionary related, but it's because we're not evolved. We didn't evolve to live this way. Now, I don't think that everything about modern society is bad. I'm a pretty comfortable person. I like being comfortable. But if you're going to live this way, then you have to bring enough of that kind of caveman with you.
Yeah,
you're going to be
key.
fucked in the head. Like, you have to know the game, and you have to build your peripheral system this preparedness stuff we talk about. There's a reason for that. It's so that you are like the guy in the jungle.
Right.
He doesn't give a shit. As long as the jaguar doesn't eat him, as long as he can find some shit to rub on the back of a frog and shoot a baboon and eat it, he doesn't care. He's good. And you have to kind of create that for yourself, or you're going to have mental problems, because you as a being are not supposed to be living this way. You're not supposed to be living worried about whether or not you're still going to be able to feed your kids tomorrow, because you evolved as a being where everything you needed was already here.
Yeah.
And to me, so I think it is, if that makes sense. I know I'm ranting now, but like,
no, it does.
On the money.
I think I could sum it up what you said in this way. A wolf is to a domesticated dog as an agorist and prepper is to a drone human, or NPC, as people are saying. And it's inherently because they don't have the skills that they are inherently scared to deal with reality, because they don't know how. Sal, your thoughts?
I don't know. Is the mental health, the condition of the mental health, condition of the American public, is their mental health an evolutionary thing? I don't know. I sort of, like I said, I think it's just a response to the indoctrination of the public schools. I think it's to be said, if we're going to be concerned about the mental health of any group of Americans, it should be the politicians, right? That's the sort of evolutionary, they're the ones whose mental health has been screwed up, right? They're the ones who seek to dominate and control other people. That's a condition. They're the ones who we need to be concerned about. It's not really the rest of us. The rest of us are really just responding to the stimulus here. And that's, everybody responds differently. Some people cower and hide, and some people, take a more proactive approach like us. So I think it affects everybody differently, but at the end of the day, it is.
That's really interesting that you just said that, because what I think Dan was trying to get at is like, is there another phase of human development, or are we going to advance or grow into something? And like, it's kind of like things don't change unless they're put under stress, right? Like coal doesn't turn into diamonds unless it's put under pressure. Steel doesn't turn into a sword unless you beat the shit out of it. Like things don't become that which they are supposed to, let's say, until they go through the stress of having to adapt, right? And that maybe the insanity of this civilization at some weird level that's beyond our reckoning is like a pressure cooker in order for us, a crucible of sorts for us to manifest our true nature, like the X-Men and Marvel and stuff. Like when a mutant is a teenager and they go under tremendous stress, that's when their powers appear, right? And it's almost like, could this be an opportunity for humanity? For like, we've been on this game for a while now, preparing and being aware and understanding what's going on and being like the minority, like trying to wake people up. And then all of a sudden, all of these people are waking up now, and we've sort of been there. So it's almost like we have this seminal moment in my thinking, because I'm such a positive motherfucker, that like we have this opportunity to really galvanize and kickstart the next level of development or understanding, and that all of these mental health issues are a signal to a need to develop that and to grow into that. Your thought?
Really,
But
that's
it's
sort of
interesting how part of the answer is to go more tribal, to find your community. So it's to back up.
Yeah.
And it's
to back
also,
up
isn't that what agorism is all about? It's all about it's about taking problems and turning them into solutions. And like you said, going through that sort of crucible. It's using that state imposition as a sort of crucible to create a more efficient alternative. That's really the essence of counter economics.
Yeah. Jack, you were going to say something too?
Well, I just think that like you have way more faith in humanity than I do. I think like if you want to compare it to like mutants or something, that's a pretty good analogy. It's a pretty small number of the total population. I'm back to, I don't think we're supposed to live this way. And I think that I love beating up on the state school system, so I won't apologize for it. But as we were talking about kind of indigenous cultures and all, what occurred to me there is no indigenous culture that puts all of its children into a room to learn.
Yeah.
It doesn't
There's
exist.
no civilized
It never
culture.
existed until we had agriculture and towns and communities and cities. And we were training, instead of teaching children, we were training them to grow up in this unnatural state and fill a role, a cog to go into the machine, a sprocket to go into the machine. But yet I would assert that the average indigenous young person is well beyond educated to anything we do with our kids today. They may not know how Google works or how to use a Pythagorean theorem or whatever, but
how to create derivative instruments and trade them on exchanges.
Right. They don't know how to do that. But if you took a 12-year-old indigenous child and kind of put him off in the woods, he's not going to kill himself. And a grown ass adult will, right? Like, the little kid to be saying something in his native language that the older person doesn't understand, that basically is, don't eat that, you stupid bastard, you're going to die. Right. Yeah. And they'll put the digitalis right in the mouth and fall over and die. And it's like, so they are very well educated for their life to live it. And instead of what we're doing with our children, we're training them. And I think we're also at a point now where maybe we've hit like a ceiling on how much the freaking mind can take with multi-generational conditioning like this. Okay, this was kind of worked in the industrial age, and we kept going since about the 1880s is when we've had this modern school system. And maybe just like that's enough generations to where people are freaking breaking now.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what, I do think the Marxists have corrupted the college system and all, but maybe like it shouldn't work if the child was thinking, right? Anybody with any logic, this shit shouldn't work on, but yet it does. Right. And maybe it's just, my father used to say that the ultimate goal of the people in power was the complete and total domestication of the man.
Yes.
Right? To completely domesticate men to the point where, and when he said that, he was actually kind of taking a dig at women. He was an old school guy and all, but literally to the point where we were more feminine than women. And not necessarily in our look or our actions, but in our ability to cope with things. Like,
yeah.
And I know that's sexist, but with now a longer range understanding, I get a better understanding of what he was actually trying to say, Neanderthal-like, that bringing us to the point where the wolf to the dog, like you said earlier, right? Like where we're obedient, we'll do what we're told, we'll sit down when we say sit. Like, one of the things that's interesting about wolves, even if you raise a wolf from a pup, and if you point, no matter how much you train them, they won't look where you point. They don't work that way. They're like, I'm going to look where I want. I can hear and see fucking everything. I don't need you to tell me what's going on. I can smell a rabbit under that bush 50 yards away. I know what's going on. I got this.
Yeah.
I'm listening. I'm not looking, right?
We need
Where a
more
domestic
wolves.
dog will be like, the domestic dog looks right where you point.
Yep.
And that's what they want us to do. They want us to still look like humans, but they want us to act like domesticated animals.
The human farm. So here's the thing, right? If a wolf pack works on merit, and usually it's a family pack. It's not like this whole like the most toughest wolf is the one that it's usually the dad, and that all the little siblings are either children and or extended relatives, right?
Yeah.
And or the grandparents who walk in the back. It's like a family unit, literally.
Yeah.
Now, what is missing in our current society, and I don't know how to, and this is what Fire On will work towards doing, is how to build that tribal connection that we all want in a sophisticated, larger system, right? But with like freedom cells, like with what John's doing, like you have like pods, you have groups, you have guilds, you have all of these things. But the thing that's really missing is the merit. What we have is we have usurpers, sniveling, sneaky fucking tricksters who have gotten into the positions that somehow the system was created to create these positions of power, and those motherfuckers have found their way into it and have used it to their own gain. They don't have the merit, they don't have the intellect, they don't have the inspirational qualities required to get people to do things, so they have to force them and
They have
manipulate
authority,
Well,
right?
and what's
Authority
cool
and
about what
mandate.
they've done is they've like double crossed everybody, and under the guise of fixing bullying, they use bullying
Right.
to pressure people into being their slaves.
Now, if we had a
Use
system
the
that
words
could,
you're supposed to use to do the actions you're supposed to do to live the life you're supposed to live, you get bullied to do that.
Right.
I mean,
And,
like social justice
but
people.
they don't call it bullying, but it's bullying.
Right.
yep,
And
and
when
then
you call it bullying, the people who are smart do have enough grace to look embarrassed for a second.
right. So it's like, where are the dignified people who can inspire people to action and to their best selves, and why are they not in fucking positions of power? Because they don't want that responsibility.
No.
No,
I
that'd
mean,
be
I don't think
terrible.
anybody here would take a position of power. Like we don't like if you said, Jack, do you want to be president or senator or some
Hell
shit?
no.
No. I mean,
You'd say,
I've
"Don't
actually
vote
been
for me."
approached about running for the House, and I'm like, get the fuck away from me. And it was a long time ago, too. It's not like the modern anarcho Jack. It was like the guy that still believed in small government, Republican government, man. Like, hey, you'd make a good congressman. And even then, I was like, oh no, I don't want to do that,
Yeah.
And I got talked into doing it for the Libertarian Party one time, and it started to actually poll well, and it scared the shit out of me. And it was like, I didn't do this to win. I did this to like just be a dick, like to make a third choice on a ballot.
We're honest, and that's what people want. And like, anybody in their right mind does not want to be responsible for other people or have that karmic debt, let's say. I mean, the last person who tried to do that got nailed to a fucking tree, and every fucking war since then has been blamed on him. You think he's going to come back and show up? Like, seriously, you know what I mean?
Politics attracts the lowest of the low.
Yeah.
It really does. And I think that the part of the conditioning in this domestication has been, and I don't care what part of the political spectrum you're on, if you are on the actual political spectrum, you either believe government gave you rights, the Constitution or some form of government document protected your rights, or God gave you rights, right? Well, first of all, God gave you the rights. Since God's almighty, you'd have your rights, and you don't. So that doesn't work out. The Constitutionalist says the Constitution protects my rights. Well, you don't have your fucking rights, so that didn't work out either. And the government granted you rights. Well, no one can grant you freedom, right?
The
So
only way you get rights is you take your rights.
fucking a right. That
Exercise them.
exercise a right. You do your right.
And
You defend
sometimes
your right.
that means you get killed for taking your rights. I'm sorry, but that's
That's
the
right.
way
It does.
It's like
It does,
that's
but-
your possible repercussion for that.
Until you know that right there, you can't behave like a normal human, because even where you and I might go, okay, these bastards did this thing, and I know that I'm going to pick my battles and I'm not going to assert my right this way. We at least know that we've made that choice, and we
Mhm.
know that, and I'm going to do this another way where you can't freaking get your arms around it. so that we can
Exactly.
rebel like the humans that we really are, instead of being little bitch freaking slaves that just lay down and take
Yep.
it every day, and
Amen.
then are stupid enough to believe, well, I'm free.
And this ties into your mental health, because unless you are
you're-
willing to die, unless you are not afraid of death, you can never be free, because you will be enslaved by that fear. And that's what the whole system is set up to do, is to play on your fear of death, because you've forgotten what you truly are, an eternal being that will come through many different iterations of this whole experience forever and ever. And thank God you don't remember it all, right? So like, that's, if once you are keyed in on that and not afraid anymore, then you are truly free. Nobody can do anything to touch your fucking cup of joy.
You know,
I think
and
I get-
like I think people need to understand when he's talking about that, like, that does not mean that if somebody walked in right now, put up a gun to his freaking head, and he had no way he could come back to it, that moment of death might not be terrifying. But it does mean the general fear of death is not something present in his life, right? Like, you don't know how you're going to actually face an absolute potential death until you do it. I will tell you that you do. I've had a couple experiences where I thought I was going to die, and I had complete and total acceptance at that point, but you don't know what you're going to have when that hits. And it was incredibly peaceful, and then nothing happened. Right. But I think you're right. Until you get there to where, in general, I'm not worried about, like, I'm going to, like death is a guarantee. Right? There is nobody here that's going to get out of it. We're not going to download our brains into an automaton or some shit like that. We're all going to die. If you know something is going to happen, if you know it's inevitable, right? As Shakespeare wrote, like, death is a fitting end, will come when it will come. And when you get there, you can actually be human again, because back to that indigenous society, right? That dude does not want the jaguar to come down out of the tree and eat him as or his kid, but he just accepts that the jaguar is there. And that's why he can live like a human.
Yeah. So we were talking about fear, Sal. What, you had something you wanted to say?
No, I was going to go back to what we were talking about, politics and you know how it attracts the lowest of the low, and I think that's an important aspect of mental health, is to you know do something you like, and that's, you know, going back to agorism, be an entrepreneur, right? Find your passion and develop it into a side hustle, and try your best to expand that and to make it as much of a part of your life as possible, because that'll sort of give you a feeling of purpose. It'll give you a reason to wake up and jump out of bed every day, instead of being, you know, one of these slaves who were, like we were saying earlier, who just watch the news and just drone on about their day. So that was that was just it.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like, exert your wolfness, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah, because it's in there. We all have it.
So somebody on the YouTube chat asked about drugs. Our thoughts on drugs,
Kratom.
mental health.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know that I would ever take a drug to help my mental health, but no, I'm and guys on the podcast, I'm pointing to my glass of bourbon.
Yeah.
It's hard if you are not the person who is helped by a mental health or a mental altering drug to have an opinion about it, because unless it's working for you, then your opinion is going to be no, I think. I have seen people work with professionals and do really well with antidepressant drugs. And I have seen antidepressant drugs drive people to suicide. So for my perspective on that is, if you're going to explore that, do it under observation, and don't just give up ownership of your mental health at that point. It's not the drug fixing it necessarily. I think you still have to put in the work to make the time to become a mentally healthy person, whether drugs are involved or not. But understand their role in it.
I think they're a domestication tool. Go ahead, Sal.
Stay away from anything that's approved by the FDA. That's step one. Any sort of drug that's FDA approved, you can guarantee that's going to get you into a whole mess of trouble. That's number one. I don't really believe in taking drugs for mental health, you know, especially like recreational stuff like that. I mean, I'll have a beer with you, or I'll smoke a joint with you or something like that, but I'm not going to rely on a substance to be happy. I think that's not really a good idea.
Agreed.
So like when you look at like prescription medications, if we start there, I agree. I've seen people who mentally improve when they're on some sort of pharmaceutical. And it doesn't necessarily mean it fixes the problem at all. You could have something like, let's say you've got something stuck in your back, but you don't know it and your doctor doesn't find, and you have pain and you take pain medication. Well, that problem's still there, but it hurts less. And I think a lot of times with pharmaceuticals for mental problems, that's where we're at. However, there are people who are literally batshit freaking crazy and do better on medication. And I'm not going to deny that because I think that's an illogical argument. Is it the best course? I don't know. But like, if you have a schizophrenic with multiple personality disorder that's trying to pull trees out of the ground, which is something I witnessed at one point in my life, to the point where they dislocate their shoulders, and you can medicate them and they actually can function, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe. I can't say that it isn't. On the other side, on like recreational drugs, I think if you have anything that like, I feel bad, so I'm going to smoke marijuana, or if I feel bad, so I'm going to drink booze, that I don't think really is ever a good approach, because it becomes a crutch and then it becomes used more and more and more, and it destroys lives.
Yeah.
I do think certain natural substances, specifically things like cannabis and other psychedelic medications or drugs, or call them substances, whatever you want to call them, I do think they can actually empower people mentally, but not if they're used to fix a problem. So I think people really, we've all talked about jokes about, look at my hand, and this great conversation we had when we were high, and then we recorded it and it was stupid. I mean, it happens, but I do think that people can have some level of transcendental experience through natural substances. Mm-hmm. And if it's done when you're in a good state, it can expand that state. And I think that's a very different thing than, I feel bad, so I'm going to go smoke a dime bag. Like, that's a totally different approach to it. And I do think that, like, I don't want to do it because I have some issues that I'm concerned it would cause some physical problems with. But like Joe Rogan's always talking about like DMT and ayahuasca and stuff like that. I think that there is, for some people, a place for that, like that will crack open something locked up inside them and maybe help them find what Xavier and I have found from other things, which is, I'm not afraid to die anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a balance with all the things. Like, I know people who, I took an antidepressant maybe like 20 years ago. I was early 20s, super depressed. The world sucked. I was like, what the hell? How am I going to make my way in this crazy world? I don't want to lower myself to do all of these other stupid shit. Like, and I took it for like 3 days and I was a zombie. I was happy. I had like, I was just like, hey, everything's cool. And then I realized like I wasn't feeling anything, and I was like, that's it. Nope, done. And I was like, I will figure this out, whatever it is. And I found that it was a crutch in a sense. It was like a tool for domestication. Like, I was not empowered. And then I self-medicated with cannabis for a very long time. And that helped, or so I thought. And then when I stopped, and I don't even drink hardly ever. Like literally the only time I drink is with you guys. It's, and that's every now and again.
Tequila out of the bottle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Bad influence.
But like,
Your Patron.
I hardly ever drink, or I will drink Kratom every now and again, and I like it. But other than that, no, I've been pretty much straight edge and figured like, whatever I'm going to deal with, I'm going to have to figure it out and deal with it. Now, I know that medications work for some, and like to Jack's point about the psychedelics, like in a ritualized setting that the traditional people have done for thousands of years or whatever, like it can be a really beautiful thing. It gives you that experience that people are going to the church trying to figure out what's on the other side. It gives you that. It shows, you see it, if it's done in the right way. It can be very dangerous because if you're not disciplined, or if there's not somebody there to watch over you, you can go spin out into complete fucking madness. So it's like a fine line, but each to their own. There are people who it does help.
So in one of our earlier episodes, we talked about our brain as a computer, and how as you become more agorist, you retrain your computer to perceive things differently. Mm-hmm. Like when an authority says no, you're like, okay, I'm going to do it anyway.
So how can I do this?
How do I do it?
Yeah. You cannot do that,
so
right?
how am I
It's a
going to do
different
this
question.
anyway?
It's not like, okay, I won't do it. And I think that also fits with what I know I do mentally when I'm like right now, literally in the middle of ongoing psychological treatment, is I am reprogramming my responses to things so that they're more positive, so that I have a better, happier outlook on
Right.
life, right? And I think that's an important piece to talk about. And it sounds all kumbaya, but it's not easy, right? There's work, there's dedicated time I put into, I mean, the way I'm doing it is writing in the journal and then I'm sharing that with the psychologist. I think the drugs really can be used as a tool to shock you out of a negative cycle so that you have the time to reprogram your computer.
Right.
Because it's really important to be purposeful about how, like, okay, we've done this cycle 9 times. Like the 10th time, let's do something different because the last 9 times it didn't work, right? That's that's as I watch the world go through the cycle of COVID, which is just another rotation of worse. But yeah.
I think we also need to learn how to like be okay that we're upset, or be okay that we're sad,
Yeah.
or be okay that we just don't feel good for a couple of days. Like,
dude,
That's the hardest part.
I can't remember the guy's name, but there was like this old ass rabbi that was talking about. I saw this video somewhere, and he was like, if humans were like lobsters, we would never grow, because the lobster grows to a point where it outgrows its shell and it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So then it has to go through that discomfort, shed its shell, and then it can grow to a new size. Human beings, we would get to the point where we would be discomfort, and we would go to a doctor, and then they would give us a drug that would make us comfortable, so we didn't have to shed our shell and be vulnerable.
right.
Right. And where the lobster doesn't have that option. So I don't think we have a lot of depressed lobsters. Right. Lobsters, I mean, their life is pretty boring, and all you have to look forward to is being dipped in butter, but yet they get along fairly well, right? Because they're living as what they are. And I think we are so disconnected from what we are that we now equate any trauma, any pain, any stress, anything in our lives that's uncomfortable in any way as something that has to be eliminated. We don't see the opportunity in it, where I think, like we're talking about agorism, like when you think like an agorist, when somebody says you can't do something, the first thing is, well, how am I going to do that anyway? When there's a problem, you're thinking, how am I going to make money on that? Right. Or how can I help somebody else make money on it since I don't have to? But immediately when something comes in front of you that is something that is an obstacle, the immediate thought is, how can I overcome this? Where I think metaphorically, what the average person is thinking with all obstacles is, how can I make this go away?
Right.
How can I not deal with this? Because there's a difference between, there's a wall in front of me, so I can climb over it. I can cut a hole in it. I can throw a rope up and climb over it. I can get a chainsaw and cut a hole in it. I get 4 of my buddies and we push the wall over. But what the mainstream solution for people is today is, I don't like that wall. Somebody make it go away. And
Well,
I think we can take that into our mental health too. I don't like the way I feel, so somebody make it go away, instead of like you're doing, Nicole, you're doing work to deal with it.
Right.
That's cutting the hole in the wall. That's pushing the wall over, what have you. It's not saying somebody make this go away. And I think so many people, that's what they want. They just want whatever's wrong to go away. And Sal keeps bringing up politicians, man. I don't think we can leave that out, because if you live your life, and so many people do, believing if I can just get the right people in office, it'll all get
oh my
better.
gosh.
You will be depressed because
Biden's
you're
the
going
guy,
to live a
man.
life
He's
of
gonna
perpetual
fix
disappointment.
everything.
That's a mental condition, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Isn't insanity doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, or so they say? That's the typical American voter.
But
So
I used to vote many years ago. I'm talking like 25 years ago. And I'm like, how did I ever believe this? I
Oh,
feel
no.
like, a kid
I
was
will
probably
admit
like,
on this show that I voted for Bernie Sanders.
oh
Yep.
my God.
I
No,
voted for Bernie Sanders because I so didn't want Hillary to take the
that's-
nomination.
I
Oh,
did
that's
the same thing.
recent.
Yeah.
Oh, my
Yeah.
heart hurts.
I did the
I
same.
know
no,
it
I
was
did the same
hard,
thing.
but I was like, I just voted for a socialist, but whatever. Like, I really
Yeah.
don't like Hillary.
Well, so I said in a recent episode of Baseline that the United States is basically like a 250-year-old hissy fit in the eyes of the royalty, who are still like tyrannically
Oh, I saw that one.
ruling it,
Yeah.
right? And it's true. It's like we had an opportunity to actually self-direct, and we kind of put a system together that might work. It was a big fucking experiment. but it was essentially because otherwise we would not exist. Agorists would not exist. We would be thrown in chains. We would not be able to live unless we complied. And that at the very heart of against, and not because we're like rebels in that regard, but because we are undomesticated. We have had the opportunity to realize what's important and become undomesticated again. Now, the only reason I'm engaged in any kind of political thought or discourse at this time is because if that goes away, it goes back to the pens for everybody. And I won't exist in that world.
No.
So I get the agorist, like, just leave me the fuck alone. But I'm also a little bit like, we got to organize and do something. Otherwise we're not going to be able to be left alone.
And that's why you need to be at that event on January 16th, if you can.
That's right. The Freedom Cell movement, the Freedom Cell gathering up in Tennessee.
Yep.
So,
volunteer state.
There you go.
So it's 10 o'clock. This is my bedtime.
Wait, what?
I wake up at 4:30 every morning now. So I gotta.
Pretty early.
Yeah.
Who wants to wrap us up?
Well, I can rap. No, I'm just kidding. So tonight's episode was brought to you by the letter Mental Health, and we are sitting here discussing how you can maintain good mental health in the crazy world as it's unfolding right now. We've heard from Nicole Sauce, Jack Spirko, Sal Mayweather, and CJ Kilmer, and myself, Xavier Hawk. I hope you had a great time. Thanks for all of the engagement in the chat and also in the video, the live chat, and for the good questions.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Unleashthegoose.com. The Telegram is t.me/unleashthegoose. And
hit that bell for notifications.
Yep, and click the notification bell. And thanks to Wendy. I think Wendy's one of the people who do the whenever we do have actual websites and places for people to visit, she does the transcription. Is that right?
Transcription. You mean the show notes?
Yeah, show notes.
I thought it was Melissa.
Yeah, we get a lot of help from Melissa. Shout out to
Right,
Melissa.
Sorry, Melissa. Thank you
And
so
Wendy
much.
and everybody else.
Yeah.
Thanks for everybody tuning in. I'm glad you guys are listening because, if nobody listened, it would just be 4 to 6 people yelling at each other. So
Hey,
thanks
can
to all
I
of you.
ask a question before we sign off though?
Sure.
Yeah.
So Jack and I are bugging out of this world for 2 weeks to take care of our mental health. One of the things I do to take care of my mental health is I close for 2 weeks between now and like January 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not now, but a couple days from now. Are we having episodes during that time, or is the whole Goose Crew shutting down and reevaluating our world and doing
Who's
art
got the
or
keys for
whatever
the
you
YouTube?
do? I'm gonna paint something.
Nicole
Right
has the
song,
keys to
I
the
don't know.
YouTube, but she can loan the keys to one of y'all. I mean, I suggested we all kind of take a break, but it's up to y'all. I mean, I'm not going to say you can't.
Yeah.
Well, I thought something that might be interesting, and this I'm just putting it out there, is like maybe hosting a Zoom chat with whoever in the audience would want to join in and have like a discussion with the audience, and I could moderate or Sal, whomever. I've done a number of Zoom chats that way with a group of people that I didn't know before, and it turned out to be really awesome. So that I'll
special.
Yeah, I'll offer to do that.
I got something too. Like, I'm not going to work, but I'll play games. And I forgot to bring this up in this episode. Like, communing with people, playing games, having fun is a good thing. So my podcast, the survivalpodcast.com, has a Discord server. You can go by the survivalpodcast.com, click on Get Social, and join our Discord server. We're working on kind of a goose wing of the TSP, pun intended, Discord server. We're kind of working on it. We're trying to figure out how to automate where goose people will know goose answers and be able to get goose identifiers and get into the goose wing where other people can't get to. So that's a different thing. But in the general Discord chat now, we have a channel on our Discord called Gifts Against Huge Manatees.
Yes.
Like Cards Against Humanity. And we play a game very much like Cards Against Humanity. We have integrated Pirate Chain cryptocurrency in there. You can win Pirate Chain. You can get a little bit of Pirate Chain because people will tip you, or you can use our faucet. You can learn how to do that there. But the Gift Against Humanity game is fun. And I will do it a couple times during the shutdown because you can just kind of do it on the fly. You come into the board, and what happens is instructions, you issue a command, and it gives a challenge phrase, kind of like Cards Against Humanity, something like, Grandma got out of her parking ticket by, And then you, as players, can put up to 2 gifts per round. They got 5 minutes to do it. Gifts, and everybody knows what gifts are, the little fake video
I thought
thing.
they were GIFs.
GIFs, whatever.
No,
right?
I'm just fucking with
Right?
GIFs.
He does not sound like a J. But anyway, like, so you put those in there, and then whoever issued the challenge picks a winner and tips like a half R or 1 R cryptocurrency. You get 17 cents or something like that. Is
Yeah.
now.
Very
so
cool.
it's a low ante game, and if
That's
you have a
awesome.
bunch of people playing, it gets spread out. But it's fun, and I mean it's freaking side splitting, and the tech guys are trying to figure out how to set up like a voice room where you can be talking while you're playing at the same time. We're not
Yeah.
there yet.
Awesome.
That's gonna be badass, but playing games, guys, man, it's fun. And like, we came up with that. If anybody says nothing good comes from social media, bullshit. We invented that game in a day, and by the end of the day, they had all of this stuff done.
That's
and
so
we
great.
have games rolling. They're probably playing right now.
That's
Awesome.
awesome. And that just made me think of something. While you guys were talking earlier, like we're all like, we'll resist. Everybody said it at the same time. I'm like, oh, these guys are all chaotic good. If this were Dungeons and Dragons, like that would be the thing. And that made me think, now that you say games, like why don't we have like a Christmas Dungeons and Dragons special where we all like make characters in the background and play for an episode? That's a thought too.
You can do that.
I would DM for sure.
I
Yeah.
would give it a
What
try. I
to-
haven't played.
I don't know what that
Dungeons and
is.
Dragons
Voluntary
since
Society.
college.
High
Yeah. We get to play out our
I
fantasies.
don't have any dice.
That's okay. We do it online. There's a whole there's a whole
online dice
good.
now.
Yeah,
All
I've
right.
got a really good
All right.
production quality for that.
Can I say something about mental health though?
Oh.
People probably came to this episode, some of whom might have some issues. Like I know in my network, I have a lot of people who listen who have abusive spouses of both genders
Mhm.
and haven't figured out how to extricate themselves from that situation. People have lost loved ones this year and last year. People have lost their entire livelihood, and they may not be in the best place right now. I wanted to say for those people, it's okay to reach out and ask for help. But if you know somebody who's in one of those situations, what's even more powerful, what you can do for your friend is reach out to them and offer help. And the kind of help that you can offer is to make the phone call, to make the appointment to see somebody.
Mhm.
There are free and paid resources in the community to be there to help them with the paperwork. Paperwork's really hard when you're depressed, right? To be there and just be an ear to listen to. When they know somebody's going to help advocate for them, I think that's really powerful. And I wanted to get that into this show just because it was mental health. And we were kind of talking about our own strategies, but a lot of us see things and want to help our friends. And it's amazing how like the smallest little step is all somebody needs.
Yeah.
That's really important. I'm glad you said that. And I would add to it that I'm a fixer. So when you bring me a problem, I want to start fixing it. And sometimes we don't need to be fixing people's problems. They just need to vent. Like, and they'll fix, like, there's a lot of people out there that will eventually fix their own shit, but they need to be able to just throw everything at somebody who can just sit there and go, I understand how you feel.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry you feel that way. And just be that person that can listen. And if they want your advice, they will tell you. And if they don't say or if you feel compelled and you slip and you start giving advice and you can tell that it's not being well received, turn the conversation back. I think that, working with a professional, Nicole, they probably do less talking than you do. They don't tell you how to fix your shit, right? And sometimes we can be that person for another person just by being willing to listen and let them freaking dump and don't tell them it's not that bad. And don't tell them you're just sad. I mean, especially when somebody's dealing with depression, don't tell a depressed person that everybody gets sad. Like, they know that, and it's not the same thing. It really isn't. And it's not good for them, and it won't be good for your relationship.
Just make people laugh.
That's a good
Best.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Byron.com.
baseline.
Right on. So I guess, Sal, do you have a last closing thought?
No, I guess just to summarize, like I said, homeschool your kids, get them out of the camps, and be prepared. Be your own bank. That'll, of course, help. And be an entrepreneur. Do what you love.
And 3D print some shit at 3D Printer Go Burr. 3R.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. Jack's got the Survival Podcast. Nicole has livingfreeintennessee.com, and all of those sites were .coms. So check us out on if everybody wants to say their social media handle, because I don't know them, I'm sorry.
At Sally Mayweather.
At Sal Mayweather.
Nicole Sauce.
I'm really creative, so mine's Jack Spirko.
And I'm